think you appeal a little bit to the success that this organization has had in the past and the fact that DeMeco Ryans and a lot of the guys that he played with were big parts of that. I think you start with that. Hey, look, you know what this city can be when the Texans are headed in the right direction. We haven't been headed in the right direction. We believe you're the type of guy that can get us there. So you know that this fan base shows up. You know this fan base will pack NRG Stadium. You know this fan base will be loud when this team is headed in the right direction. We need a guy like you to get us going in the right direction. And when you think about this team and where we are, it's a blank canvas. We don't have to do any one certain thing on defense. You know, there's a lot of teams that are already built a certain way, a certain style. This team can be created and put together in whatever image you would like. You can build the defense however you want. You can hire the guy to run the offense and run whatever type of offense you want to run. You want to run something from the San Francisco tree, you can do that. You want to run something from somebody else's coaching tree, you can certainly do that. It is a blank canvas nearly that you can work with. We got tremendous amounts of draft capital. We got lots of money to spend in free agency, so we're not going to be terrible in the first year. We're going to have these rookies that are going to play well, and have second-year players that are important parts of our organization, and we're going to have veterans in here that we spent money on in free agency to make sure that your first year is a year where we know for sure you're headed in the right direction, where we're going in the right direction, we're starting to build back the trust that we've lost over the past couple of years of this fan base.
That's it. You hit the nail on the head. I mean, the number one asset the Texans have to offer any of these coaching candidates is the roster turnover that you could be a part of with all of the draft picks the Texans have, not only this year, but next year as well, and all of the cap space the Texans have to spend money in free agency to bring in the players that you think are going to help your team win. You're not locked into hardly anybody right now. You could pretty much shapeshift this roster however you want to. So that's got to be appealing for any coach. Look, obviously you prefer to walk into an amazing situation with the talent already there, but you're not hamstrung by some of the current guys on the roster because of really bad contracts or decisions that you've made in the past. You can kind of retool this thing however you want over the next couple of years, and I think that's very appealing. And obviously in DeMeco's case, you can kind of pull at the heartstrings a little bit too. This might sound weird, and I would get it if DeMeco's skeptical of this based on what's happened the last 2 years, but like, people would love DeMeco Ryans the moment he gets here. People already do love DeMeco Ryans here in this city. There's not that prove-it factor that he's going to need right off the bat. I feel like the fans would be willing to give him a little bit of a longer leash to make sure things are going to work out. Now, the irony of that is, well, the last two head coaches got fired after 1 year. So if I'm DeMeco Ryans, I'm obviously asking the Texans for reassurances that, hey, you're giving me a 5-year contract and you're actually going to give me multiple years on that deal, right? Like, even if this thing is 5-12 next season and it doesn't look the way that we all want it to look right away, you're not going to fire me after 1 year. But it feels like, yeah, you've got the familiarity aspect that might help DeMeco Ryans with this fan base and buy him a little bit of extra time as well. So the Texans have a lot to offer right now, guys. They really do. I think this is one of the most attractive jobs that's out there in this cycle, and you obviously hope DeMeco Ryans feels the same way.
One of the big things that I really would try to instill into DeMeco Ryans is, yes, we want to go to a certain place as an organization. Yes, we want to one day be relevant in the AFC South again and then compete in the AFC, and then one day we want to hoist a Lombardi. But I think one of the big things, in addition to telling him he's got time to figure this out, he's got a long runway to make things happen, is let DeMeco Ryans know it's okay to make mistakes. We're not like, yes, you're going to make mistakes, and you're not going to get crushed for these mistakes. That was one of the biggest things that David Culley and Lovie Smith did not have the advantage of when they were the head coach of this team. When those guys made mistakes, and when those guys didn't look like they were having a good day in the headset, they got crushed for it.
Yeah, because nobody really wanted those guys in the first place.
Nobody wanted those guys. You didn't have a high belief in those guys, and you thought, okay, well, this is just going to get worse. It's before it gets better from that standpoint. If DeMeco goes out there and in week 3 of the season bungles the clock management, like, he's not going to get crushed for it the same way that a Lovie Smith or a David Culley got crushed for it. So I think, too, in addition to, like, we don't expect you to walk in day one, take over the Houston Texans organization, and be the best version of yourself as a coach. Like, you're going to grow into that. We're going to give you not only the time to grow into it, but the opportunity to grow into what you can be as the head coach as well.
DeMeco will have the benefit of the doubt because he's the guy the fans want. And obviously, Cully and Lovey, we're not going to get any benefit of the doubt because nobody wanted them. But the same could be said for a lot of these other candidates, too, unless it's like maybe Shane Steichen gets a pass because he's offensive-minded. But if they bring in, like, Jonathan Gannon and he has, like, typical first-year blunders, that guy's going to get crushed, too. Like, there's not – maybe not as crushed as, like, Lovey or David Cully did, but – like, DeMeco's like the only guy other than Sean Payton that you could bring in. And even Sean Payton might get criticized because, like, what are we paying?
Hell no. Sean Payton, it better be perfect. You're paying him $25 million a year and you traded a first-round pick for him. It better be perfect every week.
So I think DeMeco then is probably the only one that can afford, like, to not be perfect year one. Like, make mistakes and be like, hey, we got to give him more time. This is our guy. We're a bad team. We could rebuild with him. Let's not try and criticize his every move. Let him get experience here and learn from it. Like, he's probably the only guy that can get away with that.
What do y'all need to hear from DeMeco Ryans? Obviously, it's the Texans interviewing DeMeco. I'm sure DeMeco's going to have some questions about the Texans, and rightfully so. But what do you need to hear from DeMeco Ryans before offering him this gig?
What I need to hear, if I was in the room, was I'm taking one of these top two quarterbacks. I'm taking C.J. Stroud or Bryce Young, and we're going to have a young quarterback to build that offense around. Another thing that DeMeco Ryans is going to have to make very clear is what direction they're going in offense. He doesn't coach the offense. He's going to coach the defense. And he's going to have an offensive mind that can inspire some confidence in taking care of the young quarterback that this team ends up with. Is DeMeco going to need help finding that name? Like, are you going to use Nick Caserio as a resource to help go find some names? Does he have some names in mind? Is he taking from the Shanahan tree? Is he hiring somebody who's currently out there? And if he has one name in mind, how sure are you that you can absolutely get that name when there's 12 other offensive coordinator openings in the National Football League? And this may not be the best in some people's eyes. So who's running the offense, what type of offense you're running, how confident DeMeco is in that person to run the offense. Because in addition to selling himself, he's going to have to sell that guy as the steward of the offense. It'll be the top offensive mind in the entire building when he hires an offensive coordinator.
Yeah, I wish San Francisco had an obvious offensive coordinator candidate. Right, like a guy that you could poach from Shanahan's staff and be like, oh, dude, that guy's a can't miss.
They don't even officially have an OC this year.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
So, like, Brian Greasy's their quarterback coach. Like, okay, played in the league for a long time, but he's never been a coordinator. He obviously doesn't call the plays because that's Kyle Shanahan. They've got a run game coordinator and a pass game coordinator. Well, one of those guys has been an O-line coach for the majority of his coaching career. The other guy looks like he's younger than me, so I don't know if you trust that. Like, you just wonder now, and you know DeMeco's got connections around the league from his playing days, obviously. You wonder where he would go with that offensive coordinator. That's something that I would want to know from DeMeco. I sure as hell trust him to fix the defense. And the more I read about him and the more I watch about DeMeco Ryans, and obviously you can just watch the Niners play, and you know that's a damn good defense. The stats, the eye test back it up. But the more I just read about the guy, he was built for this. And I've got zero doubt that he's going to be able to turn the defense around in relatively short order. But offense wins games in this league nowadays. You got to make sure you have that one right, and that's a key component if you're going to hire a defensive head coach.
It's not a big sticking point for me because I'd be happy to have DeMeco is heavily involved in this and maybe even be one of the final decision makers. But how much say do you want in the draft? Like, do you want to pick all the players, or do you want Nick to pick the players and you coach them up, or do you want to work in tandem where you guys kind of just, maybe you get some, he gets some? Like, how much input do you need in the draft process? How well are you going to work with Nick Caserio? What role do you need him to take? I mean, if Nick Caserio is telling the truth, he'd be happy to step back and be a glorified scout and let the head coach run everything. I don't know necessarily you want that to be DeMeco Ryans, but if that's what it takes to get him, and you're missing on this guy, you're missing on that guy, maybe you have that concession to get DeMeco in the building.
713-780 ESPN's the phone number. Vera in West Houston. Vera, you're on the Wheelhouse.
Guys, thank you for taking my call. I think the other sales pitch Houston should make is a simple point. Nick is a good talent evaluator, but he's analytical. He's a thinker. He's not a leader of men. He's not going to make the big motivational speeches. His speeches are all word salad. Sometimes he throws a good word here and there. But what they need from what they see in DeMeco is what they had. What Nick had said he was looking for in a coach, like a Mike Tomlin, right? And he sees that as a leader of men, the guy who's going to be motivating the forces into battle on game day and bring out the best from them. Win-loss it's not all about the wins and losses. In the end it will count, but as he's growing in, he just needs to try to get those players together, do the best they can. I'll hang up and listen. Thanks, guys.
Vera, thanks for the call.
Yeah, great points. Absolutely great points. Look, Sean Payton could come in here and the Texans ain't winning 10 games next year, right? Like that can't be your expectation, but you want to see tangible improvement. You didn't see that this year. You saw the opposite of that this year. You figured, hey, the roster in 2022 is more talented than 2021, and Lovie Smith, there's no way he can be worse than David Culley as a coach. Well, they looked just as bad, if not worse, and obviously they won one fewer game than they did last year. So you want to see that tangible progression. And, man, that's not going to be an issue. Like, no one's going to be questioning whether or not DeMeco Ryans deserves to be here. You hear his players talk about him, and you hear some of his motivational speeches that are out there, his pregame pump-up speeches. The dude, once again, was built for this. And his players rave about him at every possible turn. Baby Bosa a couple of days ago said he's going to make for a hell of a head coach, and he doesn't want to lose him. Like, that's what you want to hear from the players who have been under your tutelage for the last couple of years. So, yeah, the motivational stuff, I want Caserio out of the way on that. I want DeMeco handling that because I know he's going to have that figured out.